Hello, welcome to
everybody
and not regularly scheduled
Yeah,
joint stream between Non-Compete
and
and
Luna.
I'm EJ,
And I'm Luna.
and we are very excited today. We're a little sleepy because it's
Aw.
actually 1 a.m. for us, but we're very, very happy and excited to be here to speak to Conrad Booker with the Communist Party of Kenya. And I know that you are all very excited to watch as well, so why don't we just jump right in and welcome Booker to Non-Compete Luna Oi. Hello, Booker. How are you doing?
I'm good, American Luna. Pleasure to see you, and I hope you enjoy our discussion today. And been following up in a podcast for quite a bit, and we like the kind of work you're doing. And we hope that this initiative will help us to interconnect our global struggles.
Absolutely. We're very excited. Yeah, I mean,
Very nice to
okay.
finally have a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been looking up, trying to catch up and learn more about Kenya, what's going on there, and the Communist Party of Kenya. And, I got to admit, neither one of us know that much about Kenya, and I'm sure that our audience is probably very curious too. I know you just had an election like back in August, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and you're also going through a drought right now. Is that correct?
Yes, there is a drought in our country. You're right. So
yeah.
we are facing a bit of difficulties, but without struggle, there's no progress. But yeah, so Kenya is going through tough times, just like most of the countries globally. But also, it is an opportunity for the progressives in Kenya and in East Africa, to pursue an alternative, our arrangement to solve our problems. Because, and now that you mentioned drought, we cannot live like animals, where we depend on rainwater. We can see there is an advanced technological development in terms of water sector, but we still depend on rainfalls like just any other animals living in the wild, where if there is no water, if there is no rain, then people got to die of hunger. Yeah, so such problems in Kenya need to be looked at, from both internal and external factors that bring out the society we have today. But maybe if I could tell you in brief, now that you mentioned that even our elections in August last time and its products, and how it sees to measure up with the future of of our politics here. So we went into the elections in August. Communist Party of Kenya was one of the participating in that bourgeois elections, and the election came out quite okay, because the Communist Party of Kenya was able to achieve its objective, which was to bring out the contradiction inherent in a neo-colonial state like Kenya. So we had many successes. We also had quite a bit of experience in terms of bringing the youth to the movement and trying to analyze the objective and the subjective factors here that plays to determine the trajectory of our struggle. So Communist Party of Kenya is not quite old, but communism as a movement in our country has been with us for a long time, since independence. So the Communist Party of Kenya just came into being by its name in 2019. Otherwise, before that, the communism was basically legal in our country. So we had no privilege to do overt work. So it's quite excited now that we can even discuss, the manifesto of the communists, and discuss about communism as a literature publicly as it was before. So the struggle for freedom and for conscience in our country has been an ongoing process, both underground and now overtly as it's being seen within the global scope. But also in Kenya, if you look at its development, you could see that in Kenya we have advanced our struggles from the fight for independence, which we call it the fight for first liberation of the homeland. And then we went for the second fight, which has many martyrs. The fight against the one-party dictatorship, which was a capitalist dictatorship by a neo-colonial chief, which was the dictator Moi. And then from there, we went to the struggle for constitutionalism and constitutional reform that gave now the rise for the struggle for, the Communist Party in Kenya. So by and large, we cannot say that Luna or Emerick, that the Communist Party of Kenya has just started a struggle in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the Communist Party of Kenya is a continuation of the struggle that has been going on this part of the continent. And now we find it the best opportunity for us to interconnect with other struggles, because we say that the Communist Party of Kenya is a party of internationalism. So if you're a party of internationalism, then we have to then disseminate nationalism based on either, Kenya first, as the rally call of the last, the president talks about here. He copied that Trump rally call of Kenya first.
I was going to say, that sounds familiar.
But it was just, a way to, to appeal to nationalism, petty nationalism, which is actually a very dangerous way to look at things, because we have seen the dangers of petty nationalism even in Europe, when it actually fueled the rise of fascism. In Kenya, it fuels the rise of tribalism and other backward ideas of the society. Mm-hmm. So we appreciate to connect our struggles with the global north and the global south, and to share our experiences, because we are aware that the global arrangement, which is neoliberal globalization, is actually a global phenomenon. So if we are looking for an answer to it, then it has to be international socialism. We cannot be about organizing only our petty struggles at home and failing to interconnect with our brothers and sisters that are facing the same problems. If you look at the nature of the Kenyan politics, just like I had mentioned, there are two actually reactionary political parties in terms of coalition. Just like, we imported a democracy. We see a democracy that is dominated by two capitalist political parties. And each time they try to outwit each other through either selling deceptions and propaganda that are actually away from reality or any anchorage on truth, or in fact dividing Kenya into various petty nations based on tribes, or even using corporate media to drive, a perception that they are indeed, concerned about the Kenyan population. The character, or Mr. Ruto, that has just now been elected the president of Kenya today, used, a bottom-up, even Joe Biden now says he's a bottom-up man. So they ramped up, the bottom-up economic model, which was mainly in rhetoric to mobilize the poor sections of the working class to vote for him, and also to drum up what you call, from rags to riches, the propaganda that every rich person who has stolen and do not want to explain that he has stolen the wealth, he says he worked so hard that, he made so much billions of money through pure hard work. And in fact, they published some, heap of garbage in terms of biographies to try and encourage the Kenyan poor that if you work so hard, then you can be somebody, you can be a billionaire. So now we are even treated with a televangelist, who tells us that if you pray so much and you will be like him, and he tries to bring out that he is from a poor neighborhood. And unfortunately, even some of my comrades in the party fell for that silly rhetoric of a comprado bourgeoisie. So we have a lot of lessons to learn from that elections, and in fact, to even investigate, even though history gives all of us the opportunity to be revolutionary, whether we are born in rich families or poor families. But when it comes to class politics, we have to look to socially investigate that those people who are struggling for a liberation of the majority, what is their class character at that very moment? Not where did they come from? Because you cannot say that a poor person who has, found his way through a dictatorship and state corruption and accumulated so much wealth and land still represents the interest of the poor people, because he can say that he is not part of the dynasty, because you probably will realize that Kenya is unprecedented in many ways in Africa, because same families have been dominating us since the independence. So we've had, for example, we had Jomo Kenyatta, who was our founding father, if you want to say so, but he was a sellout, actually, a retrogressive nationalist. So for us to revise some history to say that he was our founding father, remember the son just retired from the presidency, Jomo Kenyatta. And after that, we had, after Jomo Kenyatta died, we had a dictatorship of Daniel Toroitich arap Moi here with us. That lasted 27 years of brutality and savagery. And then after that, then we had, the long-serving opposition leader taking a break to help us overthrow the dictator. But it was never a progressive one, because it was still under the capitalist arrangement, the neo-colonial arrangement that we have in Kenya. So having said that, I think it is a good opportunity for us, the experiences that we have accumulated all over the years, to reach out to our comrades wherever they're organizing, and say that an alternative world is possible, a world that is away from the neoliberal arrangement. In fact, we call it international socialism, based on permanent solidarity, peace, mutual respect, brotherhood and sisterhood, and respect for human dignity. And if we can join efforts to do that at a global level, and we say that the biggest gift that the organizations of the North can give the organizations of the South is to put their government busy at home. In fact, the biggest solidarity is to organize the working class in Europe, organize the working class in North America, and to hold their government responsible, and to start off a process to expose the bankruptcy of the United States foreign policy, their savage of pro-war, them talking about a unipolar world. And in that way, they will be able to give us, concrete solidarity even here at home, because the governments of Joe Biden will not need to interfere with our government, with our political organization here at home, but he will have to deal with the domestic issues that are more pressing for him. And in that way, we are encouraging, our brothers and sisters in the Northern Hemisphere to continue organizing even more intensely, because the empire is getting very desperate. We have seen in the last several months, we have seen a hot, now we were treated to a Cold War between the USSR and the United States of America. Now we have another hot war, a proxy war with Russia through a pawn in Ukraine. So, and we have seen a lot of even provocations, military provocations that are happening across continents, that is led by the United States, that is desperate, that they want to hold their hegemony and become the world prefect. So there is need for more calls for us, even from the Communist Party of Kenya and other global organizations abroad, to say that we are safe in a multipolar world. And in the event that there's a slight provocation, then we need to declare our stance. Like, for example, the Communist Party of Kenya, we are saying we are anti-NATO, we are anti-imperialist war, we are in solidarity with all the workers of Ukraine and Russia, but again, we respect the integrity of the Russian nation against encirclement of military bases by the United States. We remain hostile to the colonization of the countries of the Baltic states, and even the deliberate efforts to install American puppets across, across Africa, and even these military bases that are actually being built across the continent. Now, so even though the Mr. Ruto, our president today, brags of being a bottom-up economic model and a Christian, he has made several, mistakes in less than 100 days that he is in the office. In fact, he's overseeing some of the anti-poor policies in our country that, it's even restoring our faith that even though we were a bit skeptical about his presidency, but his presidency may even present a big opportunity for the left to expand its organization in Kenya. And actually, we even sent him a warning the other day that if in the event that it continues with the neoliberal policies that is being perfected by the twin Bretton Woods institution, that is IMF and World Bank, and trying to ramp up our economy through fiscal policies without, looking at the productive element of our country, then it could be again another disaster president that may be overthrown by, hunger. Because if you cannot feed your people, and you went to the presidency by saying you defend the poor people, but now you are overseeing, an elaborate plan to do privatization that will make the people jobless. You have introduced some hustler fund, he calls it, that will basically finance the informal sector, while we know the death rate of informal sector in terms of enterprising, is almost 90%. So what I'm trying to say that the Kenyan situation now, objectively, we have all the objective factors to start even a concerted effort to organize for our revolution here in Kenya. And what we are working on now is the subjective factors to train more revolutionaries, to build a party of the working class, and to declare an all-out offensive against the neo-colonial system that is being overseen by these multinational corporations.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like definitely a difficult time, but an exciting time. And I know that it must be quite a challenge to be trying to educate and build up a party like that in that kind of an environment. So yeah, I mean, like we sounds really, really amazing, and we have a lot of respect for the kind of work you're trying to do there, especially neoliberalism has done so much to, first colonialism, and then neoliberalism has like devastated the continent of Africa, and of course Vietnam has a very similar history.
Exactly. Yeah, we were colonized by French for hundreds of years. So yeah, it's just a horrible part of history of our country that like millions of our people were enslaved and had to work in the rubber tree plantations, and it was really dark chapter of our history.
Yeah, what kind of like legacy issues do you have from being colonized by the United Kingdom? Are there any issues that you still have to deal with from that?
First of all, is the ideas that in fact our education system is still neo-colonial, and that is a bad legacy for us because, for example, the history I learned in school was, how the underworld and the Queen and the King of England controlled the world. That's how bad it was. Everything else was very Eurocentric. Even our philosophy was only anchored on metaphysics. There was never an effort to even investigate if there is an alternative philosophy away from idealism and metaphysics. And in that way, we say that the baddest, actually the worst of all legacies that we have gotten from the colonization process that took place in our country was to continue to dominate the mental domination of the poor people, and to try and tell them that they are backward, that they are innocent of nature, and in fact, they have no even capability of rigorous thinking. So that kind of mentality still stays to us today. And in fact, our colonial education system has contributed enormously in terms of even alienating progressive ideas like communism from the syllabus. And even though other sectors have come in through private sector to advocate for an alternative education system, it's taking us many years. And for Communist Party of Kenya, it even necessitated that we had to come up with an ideological school to be able to offer the antithesis of the neocolonial education system that we have in our country today. So we realized that all this knowledge that we're advancing in Kenya in terms of dialectical and historical materialism, and to bring in new knowledge in terms of a way to investigate reality, are not knowledge that is garnered through the education system in Kenya. The alternative way that people make it, they strengthen to give their effort to pursue an alternative way of education. The second one,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
The second legacy was to be able to put us under continuous, underdevelopment in terms of turning our economy upside down. In the sense that we still have many British companies here that only, focus on raw material production, and real companies are actually somewhere in Europe, So that means Kenyan economy was turned into only a raw material supplier for the development of the British Empire. And secondly, we were also turned to be a source of almost free labor. In fact, we call it here modern day slavery, where you work without any living or minimum wage. And then realize that those companies or multinationals like Finlay's that continue to produce Kenyan tea, those land that they continue to use are stolen land, actually. So they still continue to dominate us through not just culturally, but economically and politically. We inherited, the British, we call it Batuk, the British army base that still continues to stand on our glorious soil here, even after they murdered our freedom hero, Dedan Kimathi, the leader of our independence. But the British army continues to stand at Nanyuki post, and it continues to be a daily threat of our democracy and a constant reminder of British brutality in our fatherland. So, and even now the United States has even installed 2 more military bases on our land. And whatever they are looking for, we can only guess that in case that there is an uprising to challenge their hegemony in Kenya, then they will be able to activate a direct military intervention away from their home to try and neutralize any forces of change that could appear. So such are the legacies of the British Empire. And in fact, when the Queen died, it even went overboard the discussion on the mainstream media. And there are also some pretty scholarly works that have been done, but we for sure know that the permanent development that continues in our country is actually being perpetuated by the colonial masters that still sit in England and try to determine our foreign and domestic policies.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, I'm from the USA, and we definitely struggle with similar issues in the USA in terms of the indoctrination and lack of education, the complete saturation of idealist metaphysics. I mean, we have. I mean, I'm sure that it's no coincidence since you're receiving education from this neo-colonialist framework. So I know that's a big struggle. We had one comment. We have a very international audience. Love seeing all the different chatters from all over the world. Let us know where you're from if you don't mind in the chat. Solidarity from Pakistan, Conrad Booker. We too are stuck dealing with the effects of British colonialism. That's from Leo Man 22.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and Luna, is obviously from a former colony. I guess one question I have is what kinds of strategies do you have for educating party members in the working class to try to push back against that indoctrination that comes from colonialism?
Comrade, that's a very useful question because it's the foundation that we build the professional revolutionaries to continue then to advance our struggles among the Kenyan masses. The Communist Party of Kenya has a clear organization line on how to carry out its education and advance its progressive ideas among all the stratas of the oppressed people in the Kenyan society. But the main strategy that we actually adopted in the party is that each and every person that wants to be part of the Communist Party of Kenya has to join our ideological school, the CPK ideological school. Now, in that school, we have an array of study circles that happens. And a study circle is just a group of about 7 or 15 people that meet regularly on a weekly basis to discuss revolutionary theory as a guide to action. We call it a non-academic exercise, but it's a very revolutionary exercise because theory must then inform practice and practice must inform theory. So those study circles have quite designed way in which they are conducted, and they are not a top-down approach, but they involve reading the documents and advancing debates through conversations among comrades, and also being able to put those ideas in their relevance to the Kenyan context, and also understanding the historical moment of those documents that then we give to our comrades. After that, for the professional revolutionaries, they go even a second level to start to take a course in philosophy and political economy to be able to be equipped with the tools to advance our study circle programs at a global at a national level. The second one is we have two-line practical activity, just like most communist parties have. We have propaganda and agitation. Propaganda is where the Communist Party of Kenya picked up issues that are being, aired in the mainstream media, and we give a counterpunch to them by giving an alternative analysis and helping Kenyans to understand that this program that is being aired on TV or in the national bourgeois corporate media is actually taking us out of reality. So every day for us in the Communist Party of Kenya is a propaganda day, and we also take agitation quite seriously. And agitation, we do open minds. For example, I always go to the People's Parliament and pick, for example, a solid issue like police brutality, and make it clear that the police brutality is not just about one police killing one poor person, but it's actually part and parcel of the state violence that we see among the poor neighborhoods. But during the election process, we had made even tremendous progress in terms of using music. And this was really interesting for us because it was new. For some of us who have been in this process, we have stuck, doing all the chants, and we were trying to do recordings of the music of the struggles, the music from the underground. But we had new young people coming to the movement, and they came up with the rap music. And from the theoretical knowledge from the study circle, their rap music went viral internationally. And now they continue to even inspire us who are old comrades in the party, that there is always a different way to disseminate a new consciousness amongst people. So we take a lot of pride in the Young Communist League and the art and music department. And in fact, they have received quite a bit of international solidarity in terms of advancing that work even more concretely. So in the course of our fight for elections, we came up with another new tactic that really was beautiful in our organizing, especially for us who have been in the struggle and did not know how rap music or hip hop music was a deep influence among the young youth.
Yeah, and this video, it's pretty amazing. I remember when it kind of went viral. Do you mind if we just kind of watch it real quick?
Yes, no, I don't mind. You can
Okay.
play it.
I think our audience will really love it. So let's give this a watch. Okay, here we go. Hopefully this will play. Just pull it up.
Dawa kuzifanya tukikula mfupa kula nyama vitambi ya ile ganji wametunyang'anya vijana wote situkona buka vako zetu zote anazita mbua 22 ni endo tunachagua juma shida zetu hawezi kuruka msiwaitens mawera zita kuwa team CPK hatunaga tupupa tuna kamsla hawezi kutuchuja ha wengine watoibuka ndio buda.
I thought that wasn't the whole video. I'll have to find a link for the whole video and share it in the chat. But that's a little sneak preview, folks. I do love the energy, you know, and just
style.
Yeah, bringing like I guess I don't know, just bringing that kind of energy and like I guess bringing communism back to life for our generation. Yeah, I think that's amazing because you know communism does tend to have a reputation, at least in the West, of being associated with like old books and like dead white guys, you know. But it's like it's great to see, you know, the masses kind of producing this kind of communist culture. So I think that's amazing. Really great.
Vietnam in the Vietnam War, we turned communism into the whole new genre of music. We called it rap music.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing that we, you know, communists, we use, you know, like put communism and turn it into something very like easy for people to really love like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, so what kind of impact has that had? Have you had people like kind of show interest has that sparked interest in the party with people who hadn't heard of you before?
Yes, but it had a serious impact. In fact, that group is called Bangaiza. It's from the western rural part of our country. And they were trying to come up with ways to attract the peasants and the rural poor into the movement, because one of the difficulties that we had there was the technology has not penetrated in mainly in our rural areas, and the cost of printing pamphlets for the rural people to read was also going up. So they decided they will write lyrics around those documents, and then they will go out to perform them. And we had a big movement in that part of the country, and unfortunately even the bourgeois got terrified about it and blocked even the candidature of some of our candidates there, including myself, that were destined to win elections. So in a nutshell, I think this confirmed that communism is an international science, but can be implemented creatively based on our very environment in a non-dogmatic way. Also, secondly, there was a bigger revelation even further, because our country still has anti-communism hangover among the elites, and the corporate media still continues to have some mockery around communism as something that is implementable. And in that sense, but then it gave us a new realization that even this propaganda that we thought that was really big in our country, the young people do not are looking for new ideas to fix their problems. And in fact, the rural masses and the poor people, even though they may not understand communism, but when you talk to them about communism, they embrace it. In fact, the people who hate communism in our country are basically the rich people or the people who continue to dominate our politics, the elites. But of course, that doesn't worry as much. Like the youth will always say that the hate is mutual. You hate us, we hate you as much, and we will continue to organize the masses to continue to, bring out the contradictions in the Kenyan society, and to educate the rural poor and the urban working class on their historic duty to liberate the Kenyan people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got this chat from Conrad Limahana, who is an indigenous Hawaiian Marxist comrade, who says Bangais is proletarian pop culture way better than bourgeois pop culture. And also there's a long, rich tradition of communist music. It's like up into the 20th century, that everything from the International to the red music that Luna's talking about. Communism used to be extremely musical and artistic, and I think it's great to see that being kind of brought back to the fore. For this generation.
Music to talk about, your struggles and also your ideas.
Yeah.
And it's really important.
And I hadn't thought about that before, but it's like, you write a song, you make these lyrics, and then it can propagate on its own. You don't have to spend money on printing presses. So yeah, I think it's a perfectly
exactly. And the rap music in Vietnam have a lot, for generations of Vietnamese.
And we still hear it all the time at karaoke.
Yeah, the karaoke in Vietnam.
They sing it at karaoke all the time in Vietnam. Yeah.
So it was a time like it was extremely tough for us to fight against the France and the USA, and then like the music was like, we call it like the food for your heart and soul. Like you use music to express your thought and your dream and your idea, and even like the hatred toward your enemy, and to raise up.
Yeah. Plus, I'll say this too. Like, even in an internationalist perspective, I think that's how a lot of people learned that there is a Communist Party of Kenya in other countries. Like, it's certainly how I first heard about your organization, and and it's normalizing the idea that there are communists in other parts of the world. Because one thing that they say in the USA all the time is like, oh, there's no communism in like actually poor countries. That's a big piece of propaganda.
Yeah.
And then it's like something that only like rich white people are into, blah, 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 blah. I hear that all the time in the USA context. So I think it's just great to have, such a visible and energetic representation of international communism. So yeah, definitely something that I think has worked out really well. So great job, Communist Party of Kenya.
It also brings the role of and art in the. If you look at art generally, if you look at in the bourgeois countries, art has been commodified as a property, to be traded only for money. If you look at like the former USSR and in many communist society, art is belongs to the people, and it should be able to inspire our struggles to then advance life and dignity, to advance our struggles against repressive regimes. So in our view, we also take that art is not static, but also it's dynamic, and it also changes with the reality of our struggles. It gives us even more hope when we sing in the battlefronts. And when we come back, we can use it to educate people and inspire them to join our movement. Then I think that's what art needs to do, to be born and reborn in the struggle. That's what culture needs to be born and also reborn in the struggle.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's a really good way of thinking about it. Yeah, that gives us a lot. I mean, because we're artists too, so that gives us a lot to think about. So we'll definitely be pondering that. We got some more kind of questions and comments from the audience. And by the way, if you're watching right now, welcome. We are talking to the Communist Party of Kenya. We're glad to have comrades from all around the world joining us to have this discussion.
It's very amazing to see the audience, the chat from Canada, from Lebanon, from South Africa, Argentina. It's amazing.
Yep, and indigenous Hawaiian as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got a lot of cool comrades in the chat. Because you're going through this drought right now, this is probably a good topic to ask about real quick. And you did talk a little bit about hunger earlier. Maybe you can talk more about food security and sovereignty in the country and the effect of leadership on this. That's what Sefusani asks. Today is World Food Day, by the way, so this is a topical question.
Thank you. In fact, when we talk about food sovereignty, and earlier on, you remember you reminded me about the devastating drought that is happening in the northern part of our country. And, when you put food, which is a basic need for human development, and you put it, at the only as a commodity for profit, but not for the well-being of human beings, then it poses difficulty about food security, because in capitalist production, food is just an article of trade like any other. And anybody who is pursuing, agriculture in our country always try to look for markets. And we are left, with the anarchy at the marketplace, where the people who can hold food will hold it to have the prices go up. And even if it means throwing food and not giving them to the poor people, as long as it is a profitable venture for them, then we can forget that capitalism and food security cannot work together. As long as capitalism continues to dominate the world, then we will only have food for profit and not food for people. So when we are talking about Food Sovereignty Day, we should be able to expose the system, that the devastating system that has continued to ruin, the social fabric, in which we know that for man to prosper, the first basic thing that man must satisfy is food. Once he gets food, then he gets into the first social relations. He thinks of making his own through a family, and only that we get the social structures. But if you deny man or woman the basic need to help him advance his thought and consciousness in terms of only profiteering from, multinationals, then it is we should use the opportunity today to highlight the crisis of capitalism and how it contributes to, lack of food and on one pole, and too much food on the other pole. For example, if you look at Kenya today, look at where our politicians are living while there is drought. In fact, they wake up in the morning and they have a fully laid breakfast, and at 10 o'clock they have heavy tea, like they were taught by our British colonizers. In fact, they want to live, the life of the British colonizers. So at at about midday, they go for a 3-course dinner, and again at 10 o'clock they at a 3-course lunch. At 10 o'clock, at 4 o'clock they are again for tea, and then they retire for drinks, which and then again come back for supper. So what I mean is, even though we are talking about poverty, we are talking about unemployment, we are talking about people living in war zones and informal settlement. On the other end of the pole, we can see people living in total wastefulness. We can see people living in opulence, demonstrating cars of worth billions of millions of shillings. So it brings out the divide where we have too much. Even in Kenya today, we have some of after the announcement of our president, the Nairobi Stock Exchange, surged in tremendous ways. That means people made millions just by one announcement. And on the other hand, there are people who cannot feed themselves in our country. So in our own analysis, we think that food should be a priority, and any government that wants to guarantee food then must internally look at mechanizing our agriculture to produce food in massive scale and have a central planning. In fact, if you do not have a central planning in terms of feeding your people, then you do not expect the rogues in private sector to feed your people. Because now we have politicians that are appealing for donations on a man-made crisis that could have been avoided through proper planning of our economy. Even the talk now, the president just lifted the blanket ban on GMOs. But the discussion is if you lift the blanket ban on GMOs and say that people like Bill Gates and the rich multinationals in the West can now bring poison food to us, and in that way you are solving a crisis in terms of food insecurity. That's total rubbish, because we know for a fact, our consumer protection laws in Kenya are already too weak. We still have local multinationals here selling us poison. So if you say that you can bring all you want from multinationals abroad, then they want to bring us factory-made food. Who is going to check if this is good for humanity? where is the standardizations? Why are we not investing as a country in terms of biotechnology and even if you're talking about biotechnology, we should be the champions to protect our people. But we cannot give that important task to multinationals that only want to look for profits. And in that say, we are saying, the president will say we are handling the process of food security through private sector. Private sector is not concerned about who gets food. They will trade where the money is and continue to hoard food, continue to do everything possible to make sure that they can make more money in that process. So compensate for that could be my rejoinder.
Yeah, totally agree with you here because talk about communism and food security is like intertwined each other. And actually, like in 1945, when Vietnam about to have a communist revolution, actually at that time millions of Vietnamese people didn't even know how to read and write, and then that was why we didn't even know what communism actually meant back then. But like Ho Chi Minh and many other members of the Communist Party got the support from millions of Vietnamese people was because at the time Vietnam we were facing the famine because of the fascist Germany's in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then millions of us died of starvation, right? 2 million people died. And then the Communist Party of Vietnam, we broke into the rice storage owned by the fascist Japan. We stole the rice and then we redistributed the rice to the people. And that was why we got the support. We got the support from millions of Vietnamese people who didn't even know what communism meant. But only the communists were the one who fed those people. That was why we supported communism back then. So that was why we had a successful revolution. It is a matter of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing story that it actually worked. Communists, we need to feed the people.
Yeah. And food security is still super important in Vietnam today, and as well as agricultural farming rights and that sort of stuff. It was a major inroad for the Communist Party to build solidarity and educate the people and that sort of thing. And I also think it's great. I like to go back to the Parenti quote. Michael Parenti said, "I support the revolution that feeds the children."
Mm.
And I think that that's a really quick way to make inroads with the working class, because hunger and food security will always be important, especially as we're moving into climate change. And that's kind of a follow-up question I have is what kind of impact is climate change having on Kenya? And does that have anything to do with the drought that's happening right now?
Yeah, maybe to give a few comments on the Vietnamese Revolution.
For sure.
Uncle Ho is our biggest inspiration here. And Ho Chi Minh thought it's something that we study. In fact, one of our primary documents that we look at in the ideological studies was written by Ho Chi Minh, and it's the path that led me to Leninism.
Leninism.
So we take a lot of pride. And second thing I wanted to make, second point, is that communism is just not about ideas, but also about the material conditions of the people. So the call for rights to give dignity to the poor people in Vietnam was a big call, and we can only equate it to land to the tillers by Chairman Mao Zedong as well. So always in Kenya, we encourage that those people who are organizing must organize the masses around their daily struggles. So if they are landless people, then we will say they are called to have land for every person. If it is about police brutality, if it's about the privatization of state corporations and schools. So I agree with you completely that we must always struggle to win real benefits for the working class and the poor people. And it's only through that process that we will attract the majority of the people to our movement. We must continue to advance to win real, material things for them in our struggles. Now, on issue of climate change, today the president, Mr. Ruto, gave some orders that each family should plant 100 trees, and according to him, that would be good in terms of Kenya's contribution to climate change. But in our opinion, he is a man that is, away from reality, because climate change as a global issue got everything to do with the systemic failure of global capitalism. And in fact, if you look at the contribution of the Northern Hemisphere in terms of multinationals and government, in terms of pollution, then they need to pay a price for what they are doing to destroy the planet. If you look at the excessive consumption of fossil fuels and even the advancement, now they even put a petrodollar to it to try and bring even a domination of dollar on that sector. So if we are looking at climate change and we are serious about it, then it should not stop at just the rhetorics that we see at the level of government and in the United Nations, trying to give, flowery presentations about the dire effects of climate change. Now, we see, even a few weeks ago, we were meant to travel for the Che Guevara celebrations in Havana. We were not able to do because of Hurricane Ian that has struck that country quite a bit. So the issue of climate change must also be reevaluated and even analyzed within the context of one of the crises of capitalism. And it should be an opportunity for us, progressives in the globe, that we can fight for what you can call ecological justice, like I've seen several ecological justice movements. But as long as that fight of ecological justice is domesticated under the capitalist arrangement, then it would be just too little, too late. First of all, we have to go to the root of the problem and say that whoever is the biggest contributor to the destruction of our Mother Earth are the greedy multinationals supported by their private governments at home, and they are only here to profit from it. And if we have to have a sustainable global community, then it has to be centrally planned under, a government that looks at the current and the past and the future of humanity. And that can only be possible under international socialism in our own way. So that is how we will want to, consolidate our discussions around climate change, that the piecemeal reforms that are being proposed by several activists across the globe to defend the green spaces needs to continue. But the ultimate, matter of problems in climate change is the capitalist arrangement. The Communist Party of Kenya has taken certain initiatives to even participate in those reforms. For example, last year, we took the government of the day to court to try to protect the biggest green space in Nairobi that is known as Uhuru Park, that, they wanted to put up story buildings because according to capitalists, the development is brick and mortar. They don't look at anything beyond that. So in our opinion, the issues of climate change, the cost should be paid by the global north more, and our piecemeal, actions will also add up to it. But the struggle for climate change for us is struggle against capitalism.
Yeah, all excellent points. I mean, and it's absolutely a fact that basically the only thing capitalism has to offer to fight climate change are like marketing campaigns, and like propaganda.
And actually, they blame individuals for doing that.
Right.
It's the global issue, and we need to get the big blend to do this. Like, every family just grow 100 trees and everything will be fine. It's really
it's a very individualist solution. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And it's been a big issue in Vietnam, and they're doing a lot to try to move towards greener
luckily
energy.
Vietnam is also trying very hard to to regrow our forests. Our forest was burned and contaminated, sprayed by Agent Orange due to 20 years of fighting against the USA. So it was really bad, actually. And in the last 40 years, Vietnam trying so hard to actually try to regrow our forests. And by now, I think that around 56%, I think, of our country is covered by the jungle. And we are trying so hard to fight against, the climate change thing, trying to regrow our forests. But it's really hard because Vietnam is still a small country. Meanwhile, the big, rich capitalist countries just keep destroying the environment.
Yeah.
And we are struggling a lot. And while you are dealing with drought, we are dealing with like flood in Vietnam right now. Just 2 days ago, there was a huge flood in my city. That the whole city was shocked because of that.
Yeah.
It was the worst flood in like 15 years history of the city, and lots of people lost their house and died because of that. It's really sad.
Yeah, and I think you're right too, Conrad Booker, that this is a justice issue on a global scale, and I completely agree that like the global North has the responsibility to pay for and compensate for all this, because the legacy of colonialism has contributed so much to climate change as well. The colonizers had no respect whatsoever, and continue to have no respect whatsoever for like the natural, environmental landscapes and that sort of thing. And even Marx and Engels wrote about the ways in which capitalism would destroy the environment back in their day. It was something that they were concerned with even over a century ago. So this is obviously a big problem.
Exactly. Do you know that what entity on Earth is like emitting the most CO2 on the world?
I do. The United States Army.
Yes, the U.S. military.
Yeah, it's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah. Which entity? Did you say the military complex in the U.S. or something?
Yeah, the U.S. military is the biggest contributor to climate change in the world. Like the largest, or the entity that contributes the most to climate to destroying the planet. Let's put it that way. Through climate change. It's really terrible. And as a person from the USA, I absolutely believe the USA has a responsibility to countries like Kenya and Vietnam to pay to repair all this damage to the environment and to start to try to reverse the.
And the USA still refuses to sign the agreement to reduce the CO2 emission, right?
I know. Even under Biden, who's supposed to be such
Yes, and they have the nerves. They have the freaking nerves to go and lecture the whole world.
Yeah.
About protecting the planet Earth.
But we have a lot more questions from the audience. A lot of people are very interested in the international elements of the Communist Party of Kenya. Awesome Everton asked, in Grenada and many other Anglophone Caribbean countries, the legal system is essentially a carbon copy of English law 50 years ago. Is this the same in Kenya?
Good question.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to look into, because this is an issue that Marx is very clear about the origin of laws. Who says what is legal and what is not legal? What is the source of our legal system? Which it's important for us to understand, because the legal system during the colonial era in Kenya favored the colonial master and suppressed anybody who wanted to overthrow that colonial arrangement. And the neo-colonial system also have laws, and those laws are actually meant and interpreted to actually in favor of the neo-colonial masters here, or what we call in our country the comprado class, the comprado bourgeoisie that continues to dominate our country today. And we are also sure that if the Communist Party of Kenya triumph, we are going to change the legal system and reverse the con, and we will use legalities to suppress the bourgeoisie and expand the rule of the majority. So when they say today, for example, we have a system in Kenya that promotes the worst in the society to the most powerful positions, and any attempt to overthrow such a system is called illegal. And we don't agree with them, because we say that for us, we are not prisoners of bourgeois legality, where you want to use the legal system to dominate and plunder and make men who have actually stolen money to dominate our politics. And any questioning or organization to overthrow such, an organized gang is called illegal. So if we look at the bourgeois jurisprudence and the proletariat jurisprudence, we must continue to socially investigate that the legal system ought to be originating from reality, and how to penetrate reality is through a scientific process. But in many ways, that legal process does not come from a rigorous scientific investigation. In fact, if the clerics, leaders, or some fundamentalists, if some fundamentalists are leading the country, they will start to put up some laws, like we saw in Somalia. They were trying to enforce Sharia laws. Now we are being led in our country by somebody who says he comes from, is a blessing from God. Now he has reduced the debates about moral systems and legal system, to be interpreted in a backward book like the Bible and so-called, side things like that. So, in my opinion, I think we should always know that the legal system, the constitution, are actually part of the state machinery, and the state is an instrument of coercion. The state is an instrument to dominate, to impose a will of the ruling class over the rest of the majority of the population. And they use a constitution. Even as Kenya here, we have a very progressive constitution that costed us a lot of blood in the streets. But every time it is being interpreted, to favor the ruling class. For example, if you look at the constitution on the three-tier system in terms of land policy, in our country we have private land, we have public land, and we have community land. But when it comes to interpretation of the constitution, the court system that favors the neo-colonial always put the private land to be, the most important undeniable right vis-a-vis public and even community land. So we should see the state, the constitution, all are just part of the state system. And if we are to understand the nature of that state, then they will use that constitution, they will use the instruments of all the state to always, push in the rule of the minority against the rest of us. And anything that we want to achieve within the colonial system or the capitalist arrangement, they have never given us anything for free without a struggle, without a fight. So we should know that if we fight, then we will get something. In fact, now even we are telling the Kenyan people that every little thing that we will get from Mr. Ruto's administration will be a product of the struggle. And any little reform that we have defended in the future, be it the Kenyan constitution, we must continue even to ring-fence that kind of, to avoid it being rolled back. Because now we see the president came up with some talk that the law should work for the people and they should not basically be prisoners of the law. But what he's telling us that he should have a leeway to change the law as he so wishes, especially if he realizes that the laws protect the people and not his selfish interest. So if we have a clarity in terms of understanding on how the state and its machinery is used to dominate a people, then I think the issues of legal, for example, now, comrades, we are struggling in the countries of the South because the state deliberately wants to defund us. They want to make us impractical for us to organize. So what do? They put laws against our ways to fundraise. They say, if you do this, we will jail you. If you do this, you try to raise money, then we will declare you illegal. But we tell them when they said communism literature was illegal, it did not prevent the Kenyan people from, for example, reading the Peking's publications from the Chinese people, from reading from the Moscow press, only that they were more careful not to be found by the police doing them. So in actual sense, any legality that actually rides on to dominate and suppress a people must be defied. In fact, any law that protects the organization of a people to liberate themselves, any laws that, for example, tells us that we cannot go to the streets to demonstrate against, a repressive regime, those laws should be rejected in their own merit, and an alternative organization to defy those laws must be created, even if it means that the people organizing for such movements across the world need to go to organize, underground instead of overground, to be able to advance the process of humanity.
Well, we hope you can keep fighting out out in the open for a long time to come, and keep advancing the struggle, and take power. Another question on the kind of more international front is from Guilherme, our good Conrad Guilherme, who says, being half a continent apart from Burkina Faso, is Sankara relevant to Kenya?
Yeah, thank you. Now, for this question, probably I should say that Communist Party of Kenya is also a Pan-Africanist organization, but our Pan-Africanism is different. It's not, our Pan-Africanism in the Communist Party, our understanding is away from looking at only Africa as a source of material and a market for goods.
Mm-hmm.
Our Pan-Africanism actually defines a united, liberated, free Africa is only possible under scientific socialism. So in fact, what we are saying is that Pan-Africanism is an objective, but the software that runs that Pan-Africanism is scientific socialism. Now, having said that race in itself, because we have seen race sometimes become a primary contradictions when we are having discussions with organizations from the global north. But for us, we say that race in itself is an apparent contradiction that is created by the ruling class, but the class contradictions takes the primacy and the supremacy in terms of our organizing. We are not oppressed because we are Black in Africa. In fact, we have Black people oppressing Black people in Africa. So if we want to go to the Blackness or the whiteness, then we must then socially investigate the class merit, the class position of the Black person in Africa, the class position of the white person, and see if he is a hostile, if he comes from a hostile class, or he comes from class for collaboration or a progressive class. Now, for Thomas Sankara, just like Uncle Ho, just like Fidel Castro, just like Mandela, and even us who are building our revolution now, we must never forget that even though we do not play to personality cards, but personalities plays an important role at historic moments in the struggle. So Thomas Sankara is an important personality for us in Kenya. We see him as a victim of imperialism. And in fact, he was murdered by one of his former comrades, Compaore, under the direction of the CIA. And many of our comrades in Africa have been murdered by CIA. Just to mention a few, Patrice Lumumba murdered. We saw Kwame Nkrumah overthrown. We saw Chris Hani murdered. We saw, Samora Machel and his wife Ruth First, killed in a plane crash. In fact, October 28th, October is a big month for us, for revolutionaries, because that is the day they killed Thomas Sankara. That is the month they killed Samora Machel. That is the month our heroic guerrilla, Comrade Che Guevara, was murdered by those, reactionary forces. So October is quite heavy on us. But we want to say that Thomas Sankara advanced the total liberation of people in Burkina Faso. And it brought in an emancipated women, not the bourgeois women, but bring a new thinking around the working class women and how women and men can collaborate, and a new understanding on how the African people understand the role of women in the struggle. And also demonstrate that the position of, political position is only it's only, political authority, just like all other authority, only represents contradictions within society. And in the eventuality that all those contradictions are dealt with, then the political authority, just like all other authority, will disappear, and a new society will come to be where men and women can live freely to defend their rights without any need to fight for their rights, but are ready for their continental and intercontinental duty. So we see Thomas Sankara, and we learn from him, and he was a great hero of the people, and the friend of the poor people and the working class in Africa and the globe.
I love that response. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think that I completely
was amazing.
Yeah, and I love the idea of Pan-Africanism being kind of driven by scientific socialism. I think that you can't really have I think you're absolutely right. You can't have like a bourgeois Pan-Africanism because bourgeois ideology is inherently divisive, and you can't have unity through capitalism.
Exactly.
That's not the way that works. The only unity under capitalism is the capitalist class, unity of the capitalist class, right? And
to exploit the working class.
100%, yeah. Through things like imperialism and colonialism. So 100%. Those are really excellent thoughts. And we also have a question. We did talk about this a little bit, but I was going to ask you specifically about the name. AII says, if I'm not mistaken, they were not even allowed to call themselves a Communist Party in Kenya until quite recently. They went by Social Democrats, even though they are comrades. I saw on your website that you did recently change your name.
2019, right?
2019, yeah. Was that what was that like, and how have people reacted to the name change?
Yeah, maybe it's important to acknowledge that there are contradictions inherent in a political organization, and also contradiction inherent in the society.
Sure.
And we say that the Communist Party of Kenya is a product of the struggle. That means we were not born communist, and Communist Party of Kenya did not come to be out of pronunciation, but from a long journey of fight. So first of all, communists were banned. Communist literature were banned in our country. Everything about communism was never accepted. And in fact, there are comrades that went to prison for many years for just reading the Das Kapital, or were found with the Communist Manifesto, or they wrote a poem in memory of one of the communist icons like Lenin. They found themselves in jail. But that difficult part of the communist movement only gave birth to ingenuity for comrades to come up with various ways to organize in a very, in an underground way. So the communist movement in Kenya has been alive since the 1980s. Only that it has not been allowed to be able to be registered within the bourgeois legality process. Now, and many others. So that continued until the removal of Dictator Moi. And even after we removed Dictator Moi in 2002 in our country, the masses realized that the problem was not the person. So they started again agitating for constitutional reforms. And constitutional reforms only again came to realization 8 years later, which was 2010. So we can say that only until 2010 that the Kenyan had the freedom to organize, freely, even as communists. So the Social Democratic Party of Kenya, that was started in 1992 to be specific, was not a. In fact, it was a social democratic party both by form and content. But in the years coming by, it became a home for progressives and communists to join to participate in politics. So at any given time in the Social Democratic Party of Kenya, there were always two sides, which were hostile internally, and externally they put up a unity face because they knew the enemy was stronger outside than inside. So we had social democratic people, social democrats in the party, we had communists in the party, and that debate continued extensively until it ended through even a brutal overthrow in 2009, when some of the government operatives wanted to hijack the party to become purely a bourgeois political instrument for them. So the victory came in, and it came through even a judicial process that continued. And in 2009, basically after the 2007 election, the Social Democratic Party documents changed completely from a reform party to a revolutionary party. But the name did not change, because there was still attachment that we can still succeed in bourgeois politics by retaining the name social democracy. So there were debates internally, could we change the name? But if you look at the social democratic documents from 2009, they reflect a Marxist-Leninist party. And since we were coming from a history of social democracy, we even had two sets of members. We had the mass members, and then we had the vanguard members. So we could not say it was just a purely vanguard political party. And that was created to accommodate its social democratic mass that was still within the party. So you could join the party as a mass member or as a vanguard member. But when we went further into after 2010, we thought that we are going to perform well. We even performed worse in the election to the Social Democratic Party. So the discussion started even more, energetically, that we want to call ourselves. Now we don't have any legal limitation. If you want to retain certain organizations covertly, it's okay. But now we don't have any legal limitation. Just like the publication of the Communist Manifesto, we say that communists are free now to publish their ideas and call themselves who they are in Kenya. And we declare that by 2019, we will have a national congress to then, change our name to call ourselves who we are. And that is how we call ourselves the Communist Party of Kenya in 2019. And this was still resisted by the state, because the registrar of political parties told us that we are involved in a divisive politics that is against the constitution of Kenya. And since we are calling ourselves the party of the working class, what do we want to do with the others who are not working class? Do we want to, of course, we did tell them our plans with the others, but you could see we don't have very good plans with the others. But so
just make them the working class.
So one of us, you will be one of us.
So the issue came back we went for a street protest, and there were several demonstrations to support the registration of the Communist Party. And apparently even the people who were in bourgeois political parties, for the first time, they supported the right for the Communist Party of Kenya to be formed. And through a legal process, we were able to change our name in 2019. But our social democratic background still came with the baggage, because remember, changing your name and being a communist is different. In fact, when we say that we have declared ourselves the Communist Party of Kenya, I think the then chairperson made it very clear to us that now we have to start the process of building the Communist Party of Kenya and building communists in our countries. But we still had the baggage of the Social Democrats. And that is what you have seen in the last election. We still had opportunistic lines in the party. In fact, in the last general election, at the highest level of the party leadership, we had opportunism, and some people outrightly went to defend, a right-wing Christian fundamentalist just because they were sure that that person was going to be the president, and they had been promised that they can get state jobs, that they had been promised that they can get refinancing in terms of doing their bourgeois politics. So that social democratic background still poses challenges. And now we've just published a document again to reassess and start a rectification process of our organization to advance it into a Marxist-Leninist party proper. So I would like to say that the Communist Party of Kenya and the Social Democratic Party of Kenya has a history in our country.
Mm. Yeah. That sounds like a long struggle.
Yeah.
Long struggle to get to where you are right now. It makes me
appreciate what you've been through.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me wonder. I mean, now I'm curious, kind of about your background personally. Like, what led you to communism, and how did you come to become part of the party? And how did you get to where you are today?
I think I wasn't born a communist, but at least I am sure that I will die a Marxist-Leninist at the moment. But I was not communist.
Yeah. How did you come to become a communist? I'm curious. Like,
on my personal life, I don't come from the working class, background, but I come from a petit bourgeois. My mother and my father lived in the rural area. My father was a teacher, and my mama was a peasant farmer, just like most of us. And I came to the city only because I came to pursue higher education. Otherwise, I would be rural now. I would not have gotten the opportunity to speak to you.
Yeah.
But what I could say that even when I was growing up, there was a lot of curiosity in philosophy and questioning what we call the popular wisdom. I was brought in through a Sunday school system where we used to worship and hang the portrait of the Queen and the Bishop of Canterbury in England in our house, and we'd bow to them, and I would question certain things and ask, why are we contributing money from this poor neighborhood to be taken to somebody sitting in England? And exactly. I think even when I asked the question to my Sunday school teacher, this story of creation makes no sense to me. Where was our God standing when he was creating us, and who created him? So such questions led me to philosophy, but not as a communist. So later on, probably I was a bit haunted. I could say I was a rebel in many ways when I was growing up. But I was introduced to communist literature when I joined at my end of university. I met one of the underground comrades, Mwandawiro Mganga, and he was, we read about him passionately in the student because he was always in prison during the dictator Moi's time. Now he's sold out, but we remember and thankful to him that he was able to expose us to certain literature in the party that could benefit, could benefit us. But when at the university, I was mainly an activist, and I think at that time I was even an anarchist. We wanted all of government now and not in future. So my ideas have continued to shape in the last 17 years that I have been in the struggle for, only not to change the society, but also to change myself. So I could say that it's only the tail end of 2007 that I started to formulate ideas on Marxist-Leninist line. We started to study more vigorously about, in a very scientific way, to try and improve our knowledge on understanding the world from various lenses. And also my university was not smooth because I was always on suspension and trying to find food in certain NGOs environment to survive. So in my opinion, I think my struggles as a student at the University of Nairobi, engineering student, and trying to participate in the student politics at that time, which was a good thing because at that time, the universities were a bit more revolutionary in terms of discussions that took place. We could access books, we read them, but later on, now the universities have become even reactionary. They don't allow political debates. It's really tough for students to find a way to advance their ideas without being victimized. So they have to find several ways. After that, of course, I went to try to do some work in the factory floor because I was a trained engineer and engaged with some unions, but I found I was more interested in publishing literature. So I started publishing things for my Institution of Engineers of Kenya, as a young engineer, and they didn't like much of my writings because it was always anti-system and sometimes they I was scaring advertisers away. So in actual sense, I spend time now studying literature, also in engineering, at the same time studying philosophy. Yeah. So and joining the Social Democratic Party of Kenya and participating actively in the Social Democratic Union changed my worldview completely, because we got to be exposed with the number of literatures. We started having international conferences. I remember when I went to Angola and met comrades from Cuba, I met comrades from Vietnam, I met comrades from China. We had a good conversation, like we have met for many years, and we were home, we were very much at home with them. So such experiences and exposure then shaped my mind to be a revolutionary. And now I am convinced that anybody who wants to be a revolutionary, whether he's from a bourgeois background or a bourgeois background or a working class, the history presents everybody with an opportunity to be a revolutionary. And then from there, you can advance yourself. Because even we see Fidel was never from the working class. He was from property owning class, from his dad's side. And we see he committed the class suicide and advanced the struggle for his people. But at the moment, I think my interactions within the party has solidified my thinking around the Marxist-Leninist environment. That's how I could say personally I have taken the journey, my revolutionary journey so far.
Well, engineering is a pretty good background for to go into scientific socialism. So
True.
I'm sure that those fields of experience probably dovetail nicely together.
All the parts connect to each other, and if you change one, you change the whole machine.
Exactly. No, that's really, really fascinating story. I really hope we could talk to more comrades from your party in the future. But it sounds like you have a pretty diverse group of comrades there, and that leads me to my next question about, I guess, like Kenya in general and the working class in Kenya. And somebody asked a question that ties in with what I was going to ask. Here we go. Max Paolo said, greetings from Rio, Booker. What is the principal commodity of Kenya? What is the main feature of Kenya's bourgeoisie? And I would add to that, what are the characteristics of the working class in Kenya that kind of define the Kenyan proletariat?
Thank you. First of all, I will say that in our analysis from the Communist Party of Kenya, we have analyzed our primary enemy in Kenya is the comprado class, the class that produces nothing but brokers everything on behalf of the countries of the metropole and then the international imperialist, agents. That is the main. That is the class that holds the political power in our country. That is the class we need to overthrow. Even, in fact, we have done even campaigns with the national bourgeoisie, because we understand that without accelerating our production, without advancing our technology, without protecting our country through implementing internally looking policies, then we are vulnerable to the imperialist forces. For example, there's a campaign of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya that we continue to support in the name of accelerating industrialization. So, but the people who continue to kill our economy are the comprado class, because for them it is pursuit for self-interest money, and they produce nothing. For example, now Kenya, we found out that we have oil, but instead of looking at a way to start off an oil refinery and build our capacity in terms of technology, and even invite people that can help us in technology transfer, the comprado class has come up with a policy to kill the national refinery and only sell crude oil to the external. And the reason they're giving is silly, because they're saying that, if we put an oil refinery here, it is expensive to run. We don't have the technology to run it. So we only have our oil here we have one of Texas takes all our crude oil, and then we have to come and buy the oil in an expensive way.
Yep.
If you look
That's
at
imperialism 101.
Mm-hmm.
yes, and if you look at, for example, our sugar sector, which was very vibrant, the comprador class has continued to insist that running sugar companies in our country, do not give us a competitive edge and brings out, Kenyan sugar to be expensive. So they have literally for importing private sugar through their companies, and they do not care about the plight of the farmers and the local industrialization processes. If you look at the generally the cotton sector or the clothing industries, now Kenya, at least 90% of the Kenyan community are depending on second-hand clothes, which during the time I was growing up in the 1990s was hated. In fact, they call it George, clothes, to mock the King George of England, who died because. So they said that if you are putting on second-hand clothes, you're putting clothes for the dead King George. So people are embarrassed about it. But now the comprador class has determinedly want to kill the industrialization trajectory of our country. And in fact, informalize our economy and even made us vulnerable to imperialist forces in terms of exposing us to only as a market for secondhand. In fact, in Kenya, when you come, comrades, you'll find that things are secondhand. We have lost a sense of pride. Probably even most of our ideas are secondhand in terms of the books that have been dumped into our schooling system. But look at the cars that are being 90% of cars are secondhand cars. The clothes are second class. The spoons we are using are second class. That is the way to destroy an economy. So that is the class that continues to impose dangers to the Kenyan community. And any united front between progressive must continue to isolate the comprador class and, in fact, dent them to any practical life of our politics. Now, in terms of commodities that are present, what you see Kenya is known for outside there, it's a sense of pride, but it only continues to enslave the Kenyan people. If you talk of the Kenyan tea, it is Finlay's, Brookbond that continue to make billions of money at the back of the plantation markets. If you look at the sisal farms in Taita Taveta, the people there work in very difficult conditions, and it is the multinationals that continues to make billions on the back of the poor people. Now we even have titanium that is being imported in raw. We are not processing it in our country, so it's just an exploitative sector of natural resources. So what we see as a possibility is that we must continue to put more pressure on the government of the day to relook into policies that favors and protects our economy. They have to continue to realize that the idea of the free market ended. In fact, the talk of the free market, anybody who's talking about free market is out of reality. We are on monopoly capital. And in fact, when you look at the government trying to control our economy through fiscal policies, now even they liberalize and dollarize our economy. Now the government has to plead with private corporations like Barclays PLC to try and access foreign currency to import fuel to our country because they have liberalized, totally liberalized the market. We have seen that the transport sector in our country, what they populate as matatu business, has been liberalized. That means the government cannot pass laws that will be respected. They just, the private sector just bring problems in our country because they are extremely powerful. So when we look at commodities that are taking international stage, they're mainly driven by multinationals corporation. And some of our biggest problem here, comrades, are NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are financed by USAID, UK aid, and they are taking young people out of reality. They are bribing them to try and tell them that free enterprising can be able to be an opportunity to build life. But we know that free enterprising selling, hawking stuff has not changed any country, and it will never change our country. So we are dealing with several devastating effects of the neoliberal system, and their agents here are so determined. For example, when we organize in poor neighborhoods, the USAID is organizing meetings the same way to take people out of reality and paying them for it. So the people will have to go pick the money to try and buy food, while us, for example, we don't have the kind of money to give to people. We have to go to persuade them, to negotiate with them, and to try and help understand that this circle cannot continue anymore because it's killing our people. So such are the problems that we are facing here. I like that quote by Thomas Sankara, because people used to ask him, you keep talking about imperialism. Then he says, look at your rice. Where does it come from? Look at your food. Where does it come from? So imperialism is much at home with you than in the books, as some of you want to say.
That Sankara really knows how to drive down to the core issue, of what we're talking about, whatever's being discussed. And I guess one question I have about the class structure and political situation in Kenya. We talked to quite a few comrades around the world, and one trend that seems to be cropping up, everywhere, like India. We have a lot of Brazilian comrades in the chat right now who are dealing with Bolsonaro. Obviously, the USA is struggling with fascism. Is there any kind of current of fascism or far right mobilization that you're having to deal with in Kenya, or is that less of a concern than the neoliberal element?
No, in Kenya, the reorganization of our political structure has been mainly to promote divisive politics based on tribalism. Actually, tribalism was introduced by the colonial Britain in our country.
Right.
To tell the guys, for example, that the Kikuyus are the enemy and the Luo. So that trajectory continues, even though in 2007, after the brutal murder of the poor people during the post-election violence, there have been systemic progressive laws to make it unlawful for people to mobilize people around tribal lines. But even if you look at the just formed government, you realize that he is so desperate to reward the tribal kingpins, and even he is even going to break a constitution, to change the constitution, to create a position to reward one of its tribal cronies, because he does not know if he will get elected, if he cannot get a position for example, that particular nation. So such divisions mainly are, tribally driven. There are a lot of other divisions in terms of, for example, regional politics, or even not regional, but religious politics. For example, now I can confidently tell you that we have a complete right-wing fundamentalist in sitting in our state house today, and every Sunday there is a church service, and he is basically telling the people that they should get used to his ways, because God has appointed him to liberate the Kenyan people. So religion has been used as a tool to, especially to mobilize the poor people. And this prosperity gospel of the United States has been imported here in big multitudes. In fact, I was shocked that the United States are investing in more churches in my country than any other thing. And they are building enormous churches, and telling people how God loves them. And in actual sense, if you go to the poor, even the biggest slum areas, you will be surprised how many decent churches you'll find there, and how the propaganda about life after death is a center stage in terms of, making the poor people even more vulnerable, and telling them that the rich in this country, is the will of God. And even though, there are disparities, but that is the way that things should be. And for the poor people, there will be beauty in heaven, and there will be, total abundance for them, as opposed to the rich people. So such prosperity gospels have been the case here, and trying to perfect morality in terms of the laws of God, like they call it. For example, there are debates around even issues to do with abortion. Sometimes, it's not something to be discussed in public because it is immoral, while it is a big problem in our country that people can access safe abortions, and people are dying in informal settlements in terms of trying to procure safe abortion process. So such are the debates that are taking place in our country. But the main contradictions that we see is that there is a small minority of a comprado class that are extremely rich, and they are brokers of the multinationals, the brokers of the imperialist countries, and they are coming to do anything to remain in political power. And in fact, what we are promising them that in the final analysis, the eventual, overthrow will be tragic, and the same people they have dominated will know the truth to continue to advance this struggle. So such are the structure of our politics. Without the Communist Party of Kenya, there are a few parties in Kenya. The Greens are there that are also doing, good job in terms of mobilizing, and exposing. But indeed, the other are purely capitalist political parties that try to align themselves with certain political parties in Europe or in North America to get funding and to dominate us. So for us, we have to, for example, now I think the Communist Party of Kenya is going through difficulties after the elections, and we are proud that we have received quite a bit of solidarity. And again, I will be extending to you, comrades, that probably when you're posting this video out, you can also think of putting up our solidarity fund. And if anybody out there could help us to build this movement in Kenya, we will be grateful, and we will be able to rejoin the struggles together.
I come from a very right-wing religious part of the United States of America where prosperity gospel is huge and probably contributing to that kind of imperialist exportation of prosperity gospel to Kenya. I know that that's a huge vehicle for kind of exporting reactionary ideology around the world. So
the dictator in Vietnam in the 1950s, Ngô Đình Diệm guy, backed by the USA, he was also trying to, to turn Christianity into the national religion of Vietnam, and he did a horrible thing. He tried to eliminate Buddhism in Vietnam because Buddhism has the root of thousands of years in Vietnam. So, I mean, it's been always, that kind of religion being used by the imperialists, the colonizers, to cross us. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a conversation last week on my channel with the Conrad who talked. He's actually a Christian Conrad, and he was talking about how the entire kind of Christian faith since the days of Constantine in Rome has been sort of like warped and distorted into this empire building kind of distortion of what was the original faith. So that's a pretty interesting conversation. If people want to check that out, it's at youtube.com/noncompete live. And the name of the stream is The Empire of Christianity. That comrade had a lot of knowledge about the history, but anyway, I do understand those struggles. And yeah, I mean, there's also always been a comprador class in Vietnam.
Yep.
Luna often talks about how you hate the compradors.
We Vietnamese people, even though we have imperialists and colonizer here and white people here, but actually we hate the compradors way more than the colonizers and imperialists themselves, because we consider of course the colonizers and imperialists, they are our enemies, but about the compradors, they are our people. They should have known better, and they know better, but they still decided to betray us. That is why we hate them even more.
Yeah, and they can do a lot of damage from inside too. So yeah, it's a massive danger to every movement, but especially I think in former colonies and heavily imperialized nations in the global south. It's definitely something to be concerned with. We got a comment from Wesley Wagumba, who said, "Glad to see my party chairman here." So I guess we have some Kenyans watching.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody.
Party member.
Welcome Kenyans and especially members of the party. Yeah.
Thank you. And now, Conrad, if you got a moment, maybe I could comment on the issue of religion a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, first of all, in our opinion, in our analysis, in the Kenyan society, first we're organizing where mostly we are interacting with the religious people, the working class, mainly religious people. So it is a question that we must carefully handle, and also because a direct attack of religion here will have only negative effects. In fact, it will only radicalize the clerics and in fact bring the masses on their side, and that is not to our advantage. So we must never, outrightly, say that our idea is to oppose. In fact, Marxism is not about religion. Marxism is not in competition with religion. Marxism is an immortal science for the liberation of the entire humankind. So we don't have any problems with those abstract notions. Those who want to believe on those abstract notions, as long as they're not propagating, a repressive regime or even stepping on people's right through, certain moral codes that they want to impose on people. If they are only fighting alongside with us, just like Gutierrez will say, if we have Christians fighting alongside with us, Muslims fighting alongside with us against this oppressive regime, then they are comrades. But if we are using gospel to subdue, the oppressed people, then they become, a primary contradiction. So when we are dealing with the mass line, then we know that communism is not at war with religion. In fact, religion, just like the state, will wither away, and we don't need to spend some time, most of the time, fighting it. But the second thing is that within our ranks, within the vanguard, the discussion about religion is about philosophy, and it brings a clear hostility between the politics, the philosophy that props religion, and the philosophy that props Marxism. And that means we have metaphysics on one side, and we have dialectical and materialism on the other side. One takes the primacy of ideas, one takes the primacy of the material world. Such discussions must take place in the revolutionary circles and be debated based on their merits. And then we come up with a mass line to organize the masses around our ideas and their daily struggles. So that is basically our position on religion. Though some people want to use religion as a way to set the masses away from us, sometimes they start some silly propaganda that even we are devil worshippers. But we say, that's come on, don't say that, because you must be able to understand the basic of Marxism before you can accuse us or try to set the masses away from us.
You speak in my language. That all sounds
exactly the same exact position of Vietnam too. We are Marxist-Leninist nation, but we still have a freedom of religion. We have a Christianity, we have a Buddhism, Hinduism, Islamism in Vietnam too. But the point is that no religion can use their power to gain political power. And no laws in Vietnam will be on the benefit of any kind of religion.
Right.
So that is the thing, that we are neutral on religion, but we have freedom of reason.
Yeah, Vietnam is actually, majority non-religious, but they still have a lot of spiritual practices, and it's quite a lot of diversity of religion within Vietnam. Right in our
too.
Yeah, right in our neighborhood we have several churches, we have pagodas, we have temples, lots of different faiths practicing in Vietnam. They're just not allowed to do control the government like the Christo-fascists are trying to do in the USA. But yeah, all that makes sense to me. Let's see, we got about 10 minutes left, folks. Wow. I there's so many good questions.
Flies.
I know there's so many questions I want to ask. We'll have to have Conrad Booker back, hopefully. But I'll just try to ask a couple more questions between now and then. Let's see. Thoughts on? Oh, go ahead. No, let's try this one real quick. Yeah, thoughts on the most recent election being challenged.
I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the crisis of bourgeois elections. These two people, they try to cheat each other, they try to rig and then steal each other's votes, and then the person who overdoes the stealing and steals more votes accuses the other of stealing, and that has been the case. The only beauty of it is that now we did not have the blood of the poor people being shed in the altar in the name of bourgeois politics. But it has been worse. From 2007, we had several poor people murdered in hundreds in the name of contested election processes. The bourgeois election is already rigged even before the election day, because when you start off the process in Kenya by, first of all, alienating anybody who has alternative ideas that challenges you to not be part of that campaign, then in actual sense, you are saying you have already rigged an election, because you're not allowing competition of ideas, but you want to allow competition of the same ideas. So the bankruptcy of the bourgeois democracy is that when two reactionaries or capitalist institutions are fighting, who has actually, they have actually put up extreme hatred, intertribal hatred among the people. Then after one of them is declared the winner, the other one rejects the elections and mobilizes his poor backyard to start fighting another poor backyard. So we have poor people massacring themselves, killing themselves in the name of, useless elections in that sense. So that background that we come from 2007 made us very careful in terms of how we handle electoral disputes. And the rich even realized that they were victims of this post-election violence, because there were literal riots in the capital cities across, and they would lose a lot of wealth. And in that way, we had a codified law in terms of how to handle post-election processes. Now it is different. You have to make the Independent Electoral Commission your friend if you're vying for the president, and try to control them somehow without anybody realizing, or you have to make the Supreme Court your friend in that way. But in terms of electoral laws in our country, I think we've made progress in terms of having to make sure that if those electoral processes were to be followed to the letter and the spirit, we could have what we call a mature bourgeois democratic country. But that is not the end goal, because this democracy is just about, every time it's about you going with money, and then you try to get votes, and after you get votes using money, then you try to get money through state corruption processes. So in actual sense, whether any of those coalition won elections, there will never be progress in terms of the working class. And that is what we continue to do during the election process, to expose that these reactionary people will never ever care about the poor population that continues to suffer. In fact, to them it's a contest of power, not a contest of the reality of the poor people. And they want to fight egos. I've defeated you, and last time, and they keep cheating each other, because they form coalitions to elections. After they win elections, they start to fight, they kick each other out. The other person who was kicked out goes to form another coalition. For example, if you look at Mr. Ruto today, which is the president, he was the main supporter of Raila in 2007. And they are the people who, even rejected Mwai Kibaki's election and precipitated the post-election violence. Now, 10 years later, they have quarreled in their camps, and now they are telling Kenyans, now we represent different dreams of this country, and now one of us is better than the other. If you look at the retired president, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, was actually, again, the supporter of Raila against, the regime at that time, after the removal of Moi. But then when Moi was removed, because he appointed Jomo Kenyatta again, they went apart. So these are two friends just disagreeing and trying to make the poor people in Kenya just, according to me, I think they look at it as just people, voting machines to be manipulated in terms of their quest for power. But they really do not have the interest of Kenyan people at heart. So the challenge of the election process this time, I think it went on rather smoothly. There were never fights. And for us, if we can use the opportunity, because no single poor person in our country should die in useless tribal wars. If they are meant to matter, then the only war that is, is worth fighting for is a class war, not dying fighting for, rich man's ego and intertribal conflicts. That is not a cause worth sacrificing for the poor people in this country. There are many other, missions that they can take up in the working class movement to matter for, but not to fight for the rich politicians to compare their egos and who will steal on behalf, of the class for this period of 5 years.
Yeah, no war but the class war. I completely agree with you on that. I guess one question I have, one of my last questions, I have one more question after this. So my second to last question, kind of piggybacking on this, is Luna and I are both just finally getting over a bout of COVID, and I gotta ask how COVID has taken course in Kenya and how it has affected the working class, and how the Communist Party has been responding to it.
Thank you very much. And also, I think COVID-19 brought out the inherent contradiction within the neo-colonial society called Kenya. And we saw how unscientific the Kenyan government handled the COVID crisis. And even it forced the Communist Party of Kenya to organize for, because now there was an option. Do you stay in your house and die of lack of food? Or do you protect the rich man from dying of COVID? Because those are the realities we were facing at that time.
Yeah.
Because the government of the day was only copy-pasting things that, experiments that were being done by the West that were unscientific. In fact, you will stay in your house anxious. No person will come to even, assess your condition and advise you like, are you either COVID positive or negative? But there was a blanket rollout of, you stay at home and don't come out, but nobody cares about the social conditions of the people that were meant to stay, the people who literally wake up every day to go and sell their labor. There was never social programs that was rolled out to be able to cushion them from dying of hunger. So there were so many riots, and unfortunately also police murdered a few people, quite a few people, poor people during that process. Secondly, it also made, the rich also made billions of money. In fact, if you go online, there is a trending topic. It's called the COVID millionaires in our country, because they have funds to finance the COVID process. And then they continue to do state procurement and literally stealing money set aside. And they even used COVID-19 to borrow money under what they were calling endemic fund. And that money was stolen by relatives of the former president, who is known today. But the current president is very reluctant to hold them to book or even to try them. Because if he starts that process, then he may open a Pandora box and they will say, you also steal this, you also stole this, I saw you stealing there. But that COVID millionaire story took place, and the Communist Party of Kenya suffered as well, because it is also at that time that our offices were broken by government and comrades arrested in the name of trying to create an arrest during a situation that needs solidarity with everyone. But our messaging was very clear that we need a scientific homegrown approach in terms of sorting out COVID-19. We need a government to roll out a social program to protect the vulnerable, stratas of the society, mainly the poor and the working class in our country. And we do not want money to be set aside to bail out corporations in the name of loss of business, while those corporations that were being given money did not transfer those benefits to the working class. So the COVID-19 also help us to bring out certain discussions around how many countries globally have been able to manage the COVID-19. So the Cuban flag went even double high in our country in terms of their willing to support their international doctors brigade going across the world was big news here for us. And we've all seen how our Chinese brothers and sisters was able to, to manage the COVID-19 even against the racist attacks of the Trump's presidency. But in a nutshell, COVID-19 brought out, various contradictions within the capitalist system, and even, I think, warned the rich people that you are not safe anymore with this kind of arrangement. So if they are, best to think about a new world order, then the COVID-19 gave them an opportunity, because the workers on the front line died of the poor people died not just for COVID, but also died of lack of food and water, while the government of the day and their henchmen continue to make millions of money through just helping themselves from the state coffers. It was just money from the state coffers. So that is how COVID-19 was handled. And even now, there are still campaigns about if it is issues to do with COVID-19, why are we involving the big farmers to control in terms of distribution of medicine and in terms of helping them to only make more profit? So the issue of patenting of COVID-19 vaccines is also a big debate now happening in our country. But the availability of it, I think, we have it, but we are paying loans, and we are also paying heavily to the multinationals to be able, to the big pharma, to be able to make more money during these difficult times for the Kenyan working class.
Sadly, familiar story. Just far too many countries have had a completely unscientific response to COVID. Of course, the USA. Very, very
Do you say
high
it's
on
like
that
the
list.
most deaths count body of
Yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of that unscientific thinking comes via the colonial system and imperialism and all that stuff. So it's devastating. Honestly, I know a lot of people who've been very, very severely affected by COVID, disabilities, deaths, that sort of thing, and as we all do. So yeah, thank you for that thorough answer. I guess our last question is, if people want to learn more about the Communist Party of Kenya, if they want to follow you and support you, where, how can they do that? How can people support the party and spread the word about what you're building?
Maybe I could say that we got a very proactive website, that is www.communistpartyofkenya.org. We publish a lot of documents there. And then we have a quite following on Twitter as well. We are big on Twitter, Communists KE. And I also must say that we receive a lot of support from Twitter. We do normally host a solidarity drive there, and we receive a lot of support globally. And then we have a Facebook page, which is Communist Party of Kenya, that we continue to also update our members and the public about it. Those people are interested also to follow my handle. I am at Buka Biro. That's a name I was given in the struggle. Biro basically means Buka is coming. So at Buka Biro, that's my Twitter page. And Buka Ngesa Omole, which is my Facebook page. So we could continue to interact. We also try to hold monthly Twitter spaces on issues of topics that are dear to us in internationalism. So that to us would be really good for us if we get people to follow us and also stand in solidarity with our struggles here. Probably you also know that the Communist Party of Kenya is going through an internal struggle, and we are frank with our supporters locally and abroad that we have a few comrades that have decamped to be part of the neo-colonial system, and now works with the government to try and frustrate our activities here and bring confusion in the Communist Party of Kenya. So we are also fighting that out, and we hope to see it, in many ways.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to E Muji for the super chat. We really appreciate you. We also got a comment from Director Westfield who said, "As a Kenyan, I really appreciate this discussion." Well,
Wow.
It's so awesome that we have Kenyans watching right now. Again, welcome. Thank you for watching, everybody from Kenya and around the world. We also got, I got to say, Booker, before we go, a lot of compliments on your posters and your Cuba shirt. So the audience really likes your aesthetics over there.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
We love it too. But yeah, I really do hope, Booker, that we can have you back on and maybe some other comrades from your party, and we can keep the dialogue going. And
yes, you have an update on the Communist Party too.
Yeah. So we'll hopefully stay in touch, and we'd love to have you back on soon. But thank you so much for all the work you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to our audience. And yeah, we hope you keep
educating us.
Absolutely, 100%. It's very important work.
Red salute, comrades, and long live internationalism.
For
sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really hope that in the future I can bring you back.
Yeah, we'll have you on very soon, Booker. Be safe, solidarity. We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye, comrades.
Bye-bye. Wow, that was amazing. That was a fantastic interview. It's been a long time since we've had a really good international interview.
Yes.
It's been a weird time, like in terms of like we don't usually broadcast. It's 3 a.m. now in Vietnam, so Luna and I are going to go get some sleep because we have broadcast in about
7 hours.
7 hours. So if you enjoyed this and you're awake in 7 hours, we hope you'll join us again for broadcast. It's at youtube.com/noncompete live and youtube.com/LunaOy live. We're also on Twitch. Twitch.tv/noncompete. Twitch.tv/Luna_Oy.
No,
Luna_Oy. Yeah. So anyway, thanks everybody. Thank you again to Imuji for the donation. If you enjoy this content, we hope that you will support us on Camaraderie and Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we really encourage you to go and learn more about the Communist Party of Kenya. They do have a lot of really interesting stuff going on. We've put the links to their Twitter and Facebook in the description. I will add the YouTube channel as well, because then you can go. They have a 1 hour long Kenyan Communist Party music video that you can just put on next time you have a little get together. Mm-hmm. You can play an hour's worth of communist revolutionary Kenyan party music, literal Communist Party music. So anyway,
really amazing.
That's all for now. Nobody's streaming right now on Twitch that we know. So we have. McClubbin, thank you so much for the generous donation.
Thank you so
right at the
much.
last second there. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate that. So y'all make this possible. We couldn't do it without you. So yeah, we're gonna go get a little sleep and we'll see you again at Breadcast. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye everybody.